Ooh, now y'all have to hit the little thing that says you'll let me record you, so you're welcome. Yeah, hey, if you could throw on your camera, cool. If not, no judgment, and I will never make fun of you for how you look or if you're doing other things. It's just there's a whole lot of black screens, and poor Gil and I get lonely because I've got Gil here in the office with me, or in the training room. This is not an office. All right. So those of you, I think some of you were here last time we met. I think some of you were not. And so we're going to do things the same.
You went silent again.
Well, that was just rude. That was Amber muted me, and I bet she's laughing about it over there. I know it was obviously accidental. So what I'm asking is, I want to know what you guys want to talk about today, and I will help facilitate. But the whole idea is that we're talking about topics that matter to you, because I don't want to preach at you about something for an hour and you leave here and you're like, oh man, I really wanted to talk about, you know, listing presentation, and all he talked about were buyers. What a jerk. I don't want to be that guy. So give me, and just, you don't have to raise your hand, throw out some topics, because I'm going to write them down on this thing that you probably can't actually see on the camera, but that's okay. I'm going to write them down anyways. So what do we want to talk about today? This is where you have to talk.
How about if there's any kind of letters that folks are sending out?
Okay. What else we got? This is a mastermind, my friends. And I know some of you are just so not comfortable speaking up. And yet, if you want to get something out of this, you got to participate.
I would like to talk a little bit about listing presentations.
Okay. Anything like, tell me more, like what in regard to listing presentation? You're like, I have no clue, right? What?
Yeah.
If you had to figure, like what, like how to do it, where to get one, best practices, like what are?
I would definitely say best practices.
Okay.
Or what are some objections that you've faced that you think we might face as well?
Cool. The good news is there's like five or six objections, and that's it. They just come in different forms. So you only have to master a few things, and that's how you take all the listings. Oh, and some of you turned your camera on. You're awesome. Thank you. What else we got? So we've got, I wrote down golden letters because that's like the buzzword for it right now, but just letters in general, listing presentation and best practices around that. What else?
How about
okay.
quality pre-qualification of buyers?
Like how to pre-qualify a buyer, like not on the lending side, like how do you make sure you're not wasting your time? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then Gil, who is my one friend in the room, so he gets 10 extra points. The points are good for nothing. He had said consistency. I can't write and talk at the same time. Buyers. Consistency. But so I was going to ask you, so what do you mean by consistency? Like,
well, for me specifically, as it applies to marketing.
Consistency in marketing.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
How do you keep things going when the chaos? You just not executing well.
Okay. I mean, I think 4 things is probably pretty good. And did anybody else have something they felt strongly about? Because please do speak up.
Is Command too
Yes.
techy for this call?
Command is, no, not necessarily. Like what about Command?
So my bridge between Command and DocuSign didn't go too smoothly over the weekend. Like it didn't put the signature lines in, so I'm not sure if it's something I did or if other folks are experiencing issues with that part of Command and DocuSign. I guess that's really my question.
I feel like just for the, and I hear you, and I feel like that's probably an Andrew question more than
Yeah, that's right. That's why I said, is it too techy?
Only because I feel like I want to make sure that you leave with something that'll make you more money today. And DocuSign is just something you have to deal with. It doesn't make you money.
Yeah, more money's good.
So yeah, Andrew.
Some
for
money's
sure.
good.
Yeah, money is great. Inez, what were you going to say? Or Inez?
I was going to say about out of town buyers, like what should be the process? Do you do a complete consultation with them? Do you
Perfect.
do certain things first, especially if they're planning on visiting? So what are the steps in the process?
We are going to put that with Lisa. Honestly, they go hand in hand. And a lot of our buyers are out of town right now. That's part of why we have a bizarro world market at the moment. So, okay, let's go in order. Let's talk about letters. So let's start with you guys, because we've talked about this a lot. Like, is anybody on this call sending any type of letters out, whether you're doing it around listings, doing it for buyers that are looking and can't find anything? Who is utilizing mailing letters right now?
Me.
Oh, I don't. Oh, that was Tammy, right? I could tell by the giggle
Yes,
voice.
it is.
Okay. What? Okay. So tell us, what do your letters look like, and how is it going? Oh, you turned your camera on. And then you turned it right back off. That's hilarious. Okay. Talk to us from your black square then. What have you been sending? When and where? Just tell us about what you're doing.
I have been sending more consistently because I'm looking for listings.
Okay.
In my pocket neighborhoods close to where I live.
When you say, so let me ask, when you say pocket neighborhood, what do you mean?
Neighborhoods that don't necessarily have a lot of high turnover, but would generate business in the price point that I'm looking for.
Okay. Total side note that I just want to say out loud to get your wheels thinking, all of you, is if there's a neighborhood you know that does not traditionally have a lot of turnover or hasn't had turnover in a long time, it's my professional slash I can't back this up opinion. I would be marketing in those neighborhoods like mad right now, because I think the people, there's always going to be, there's no neighborhoods where people just don't move. And yet things do go very cyclically. And I'm just thinking right now, if you've got neighborhoods where a lot of people have been there a long time, you pair that with the ridiculous prices that we have right now, I believe those neighborhoods are going to start turning over anytime now, especially if it's a neighborhood. You got to think, like, if you have a neighborhood where homes are maybe 20 to 30 years old and you've got a significant portion of original owners still left in there, they're getting to the age where it's going to be time for them to downsize or potentially even move somewhere with assisted care. So just think about that. Like I would normally like I've had agents come to me and talk about farming all the time, and you want to look for a neighborhood that's got turnover. I just think because of the nature of this market, that if you're not seeing a lot of turnover, that's actually a pretty good neighborhood. It's probably right for the picking. So just side note on that. But so, okay, so you've got pocket neighborhoods in your area that you are. Did I? Oh, I was like, did they mute me? They spotlight me. Okay, yay, I'm here. I'm the guy in the background. Anyways, so what else? So you're sending these letters out. Have you had any results, and what do the letters say?
I have not had a lot. There's actually one of the neighborhoods has 2 agents in it. So I try not to send to those. I try to not include those in my mailing list if I know that there's agents. But there's one I'm still working on trying to get, because he had it listed quite a while ago, and now he could probably get another 100 or so for his house because it was updated when he listed it 5 years ago.
Okay.
And it was listed 5 years ago at 379. And right now, one agent had his house in there for sale at 490, and it wasn't updated. So
how many?
There's 36 houses in this one little pocket, and then there's another 50 or so in another little pocket that has a few absentee owners, which are a big deal. And then the other one has about 150 or so.
So so roughly how many letters do you think you've sent since you started this?
Probably about 200 easily.
Have you, so you haven't had a listing yet from it. Have you had, like, how many responses have you had though?
Some just want to know what the market is.
Well, but how many? Like literally, how many people have responded to you?
A good 10 or so,
Okay,
10, 15.
so you're in a dialogue with 10 people that you weren't before that could turn
Correct.
into business because now you have all
Correct.
their information. Okay.
So now
Um,
I can nurture them until they're ready.
And I think that's great. What does, and not, you don't necessarily, I mean, if you want to, if it's there, you can, but like, what does the letter say?
It's one of the ones I got from the Pivot group. Basically, you know, if I had a buyer and what would you sell your house for right now? Kind of situation.
So it's short and sweet, right?
Pretty much. I mean,
Okay.
there's a few other little things, but not, it's not overly long, but it's not like one sentence.
Okay. Okay. Who is anybody else? Oop, Amber got that one. Is there anybody else who is sending letters or has sent letters?
Yeah, I've sent them. That's why I'm asking the question.
So tell us about your experience. Yeah, go ahead.
So I have, so I picked 50 people in 2 subdivisions, including the one I live in. I did
Okay.
all non-owner occupied. And I did some other things like where I live, there's 10 enclaves and some have gates and some don't. I did the ones that don't have gates, so it'll be easier for folks to drive up and see the house, things like that. I had some other criteria like time of ownership, equity. I had quite a bit of criteria actually for the non-owner occupied. And I've sent out, there's 50, and I sent them to the homeowner, and I sent a letter to the tenant, and basically
Okay.
put future homeowner on that one. So that's 50 and 50. I've done 2 rounds of that. I've not got a single response back yet.
Huh.
And the first one I sent out the very end of March.
Okay.
So a while. It's been almost 2 months.
So what does your letter say? I mean, is it on the longer side, shorter side? What does it say? What's the
Oh, it's
message?
very short. So the one to the owners was basically something to the effect of, some of them I put CMAs in to show them what their house was worth. Some of them I didn't, and it was basically it was not a scare tactic, but I said with interest rates change, it was maybe like a paragraph. I basically gave these reasons why now would be a good time to sell. And then to the tenants, I basically did the opposite and said, here's why it's a good time to buy. So
Okay.
it was short. It wasn't like a 1-sentence deal, but it was fairly short.
So first of all, I like the idea of reaching out to tenants. I mean, granted, obviously it's tough to be a buyer's agent right now, and yet people are buying. And the truth is, as crazy as the prices are, it's still a good time to buy. And if you are a renter, or if you've helped one or looked lately, the rental prices are also insane, and there's also nothing available. So their
I
world
can
is,
attest to that.
yeah, right. So their world is crazy regardless. I mean, it is a good time to get the message out about buying. And I would say, I feel like on average, if you take 10 renters, I bet you 4 of them can buy and think they can't.
Yep.
Or think they don't, they think that they have to put 20% down when we know that's not the case, even though obviously that would help them.
Right.
So I think that's great. The other, here's what I would say, and this is just, I'm giving feedback, no right, no wrong. I love that you're taking action. I would not be including CMAs, especially not to a stranger, because this is my thing. Why do they need to call you now? You already, I mean, if they really want to sell, I guess they could, but the truth is, like, you already gave them information. The people who are getting good results from this are being one of 2 things are happening. It's either very short and sweet, like very short, like literally, hey, if I'm working with a buyer, or if you're not, like, the market's insane right now, there's nothing for sale. I'm not saying this is the actual verbiage, the market's crazy. What is the number is there a number that would make you move? If there's a number that would make you move, you should call me. Like that level of just like, no more information. They got to get on the phone or send a text or whatever in order to learn more, because you want to hook them. So that's one thing. The other thing that seems to be working is to go completely different and just be a clown, like to be silly, like and this, I think this works better. I'm sure you could come up with something. I don't have examples of something if you don't have a buyer, but if you had a buyer, I mean, literally like sending something out that says, you know, I have the buyer looking, if you'd be willing to sell, not only will you get top dollar, we'll also, you know, I don't know, you got to be careful. You got to say something you'd really do, even though they probably wouldn't care. But, you know, it's like, you know, we'll buy you, you know, we'll buy you a case of Tito's. We'll, you know, we'll send you to dinner at Burns. We'll buy you pizza every Friday night for the next year. Like those are, I feel like that's consistently, not just locally, but in other places where I know agents, those are the two things that work: keeping it super short, or still keeping it short and like taking more of a, because if they're getting multiple letters and or postcards and they get one that's actually kind of funny, it stands out in a way. So that would be my advice, because it's absolutely working for a lot of people. So I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's just, it's execution. The other thing that I will say, and again, this is my opinion, this is no, and I don't know how long it did take, the time that you would have spent researching all that different criteria, if you could have just sent out 100 letters instead of 50 and not done as much research, I don't know. Because a lot of it is, you know, it's throwing spaghetti at a wall anyways.
Yeah.
So, you know, you might be better to spend less time, you know, I never want to give the message that you shouldn't be planning and shouldn't be thinking ahead and treating your business like a business. And I do feel like one of the biggest stumbling blocks for most agents, especially agents who are just starting out and or kind of looking to break through to the next ceiling, is it's the getting ready to get ready. And sometimes you just got to go get messy. And I think that if you spend time around any of the top agents in general, and definitely in this office too, I will tell you, it's funny, like I won't name names, but I feel like I get specific negative feedback every once in a while about some of our top agents. And in my head, I kind of chuckle because I'm like, well, that's why they're making high 6 and low 7 figures. Because they're not worried about every last detail. They're not being reckless per se, but they're going out and taking action and getting stuff done. And yes, every once in a while things slip through the cracks, or a letter goes to an agent-owned property. It's just one of those things where I think it's better to take massive action over perfect action. That's just my 2 cents on that. Anything else though? Like anybody else doing letters? Anybody else have thoughts or questions on that?
I am.
Who was I?
Me, Hudson, of course, Jody.
Oh, hey, Jody.
So I'm doing about 50 letters every 2 weeks. I have actually kind of narrowed it down to a particular neighborhood, and I even got fancy with the last ones. I showed you my crazy stamp just to kind of set myself apart. But I'm throwing out red envelopes with bright yellow paper, and it's a fairly small paragraph stating, we have tons of buyers. If you're looking to sell, blah, 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 here. I don't give any CMAs or anything like that. But like whoever the last one was, I want to say probably 300 letters that I've sent out. I've not gotten anything, no calls, no bites, no whatever. And I've changed up. So each time they get a little bit different letter. So that way they're just not getting a repetitive letter.
Okay.
I need help.
Hey,
Well,
Hudson.
Yes.
I saw on the pivot page, somebody was doing it at a much higher level, and they were doing it kind of like an 8x8. So every week they would send something different to that farm area or whatever. So 1 week would be a letter, 1 week might be a postcard. Another one would be maybe a calendar or something. And another one would maybe be, I don't know, like a market snapshot of what's going on in the market kind of thing. And they were doing that on a weekly basis until that person either said, stop sending me this mail, or they got a phone call with an appointment.
You know, it makes me think of just the general gist of, I think we stop, whether it's strangers or our sphere, we stop ourselves from taking action because we're worried about bothering people. But here's the deal, especially in a situation like this, where you're talking about just picking a neighborhood and going after it and almost kind of creating like a mini farm. Like, I feel like, who cares if you bother them? You don't know them. They don't know you. You're never gonna, like, they wouldn't know you if you passed them in a supermarket. Like, what if you just did that? Like, you know, what if you concentrated the effort and full on, for lack of a better term, like stalked them? Like, what if you just did that? What's the worst? I mean, because I think you'd start to see results. Like, I wish Kim Basin was on here, because I know she's had quite a few successes in a particular neighborhood recently where she did not have a prior presence, but she had a buyer looking, started door knocking, got a listing, door knocked around that, got something. I think she's up to like 4 or 5 listings in this one neighborhood. And she's just, and I do think she's mailing as well, but and I know that she's door knocking, not saying you have to do that. I will just say, but it's a good example of, she had no presence coming in. She just she put her foot in the door. She got one to start, and now she's just catapulting off of it. And I don't know that she'll keep it long term. I feel like she kind of jokingly said she's like sucking it dry right now, like getting everything she can get right now, and then she'll probably move on somewhere else. The reason it's working though is because she's being super consistent, even though it might not be long term. Like, she's going back, she's sending something else, she's going door to door, she's taking the time to hand address the things that she's mailing, things like that. So I think that's actually a really good point, Tammy, and I think that might be part of it, you know. And again, Jody and Jim, like, I mean, you
Well, and the other thing is, the reason behind that is, when you go to a store and you sign up for their mailing list, they're going to send you something. Some of them will send you something every single day until you either unsubscribe or you buy something.
Well, so that's the funny thing. And that's, you know, this is kind of spiraling into database, and yet there's nothing more important. So there you go. Like, is there anybody here who does not order things from Amazon once in a while or all the time?
All the time.
Cool, crickets. They send you emails 32 times a day, and you don't get mad about it, and you give them business. And I think that it's important to remember that, in that you truly can't over communicate. That doesn't mean you'll never have somebody that unsubscribes or calls you because you did mail 7 different things. And they're like, take me off your list. Move on. That was not the person for you. It doesn't matter. You're not, if one person calls you out of a 200-person neighborhood to yell at you, that's not a loss. It doesn't matter. So I would really keep that in mind in all of the things that you do. You really cannot over communicate. You just can't. So there's that. So stop telling yourself that you're bugging people, because if you are, they're just not your people, and that's okay. It's totally okay. All right, I want to move. I want to make sure we get through a couple of these different things.
Thank you for covering it.
So let's talk about listing presentation best practices. So I want to go. That was Bo that asked that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Just so I don't start blabbing, because I can do that real easily. I don't know. Ask me a question, like, how can we best help you with that? Because it's just a wide topic. Like,
so one of the things I'm a little nervous about is if I go to a listing presentation or I get in front of somebody who's willing to sell their house, and they bring up the question, and questions like this, similar to this, where they say, yeah, I can sell my house at an inflamed price, but that means I would also have to buy a house at an inflamed price. What would I do about something like that?
well, you know, the great thing about that, Mr. Seller, is that right now interest rates are still historically low. And so, Ian, here's the other thing. The price is not actually inflated right now. May I explain why? They'll say yes, FYI. If you look, and this is where you're going to want to have some sort of data. And this is stuff like, if you go back to the Gary Ubaldini Mastermind from, I believe, last Friday or maybe 2 Fridays ago, there's some materials there, which will have some stats. The truth is, guys, I don't think we're inflated. It sure feels like it right now because this market is bonkers. But if you look, all we've really done is come up to about the price that we were at the top of the last market. And historically, every time we go up and we go down, we come back higher than the last market. So I don't think we're inflated. I think this was just, we've never had such a drastic drop as we did in the last market shift. Therefore, the market raise, like the appreciation this time, seems crazy. That's just because we went down further than we've ever gone before. So I don't think that we're inflated. And Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you know, your rates are going to be fantastic. Here's what you have to remember. You can't buy high. You can't sell low. You can't sell high and buy low. Like it just doesn't, at least not at the same time. So I mean, that's essentially the gist of what you tell them though. Like they can't have their cake and eat it too. The good news right now is that they can sell at a massive profit, probably more than they ever thought they could. And yes, they're going to pay a high price on the next house. All the analysts that are trustworthy, the analysts that have been right for years and years and years, especially for our local market, because we have such an influx of people, think that we will see appreciation for another 4 to 5 years. Not at the same speed. It'll eventually slow down because otherwise no one would be able to afford to move here. That said, there's no indicators that we're going to see a downturn in value. So they're still buying an appreciating asset. They're buying at a better rate, because that's the other thing. All those same people are saying, and you can ask any of our preferred lenders, anyone that you know, the rates are expected to continue to rise. There's nothing to show that they're going to go down again. And they're still low, so it's still great. It's not like they went up to 8%, which would not even be a crazy number if you look at historical trends. They're still low, and yet they are going up. And the longer somebody waits to take advantage of a purchase right now, it's just going to hit their buying power. Because if prices continue to go up and rates do as well, I mean, the rates going up take away your buying power anyways. Now you add on the prices appreciating. Honestly, somebody who would like to move, they can't afford to wait. And that's not a script, for the record, Bo. I mean, that's having some knowledge of what the market's doing and being willing to answer the questions you're asked. You know, most of the time that you'll walk into a situation where somebody wants to sell their home, you're walking in and they're ready to hire you. The question is, are you going to talk yourself out of it? And that you have to remember that they wouldn't have you in their home if they weren't serious about hiring you. The way that you answer questions and the way that you show that you're there for them and their needs is how you will get the listing. So what's another objection that you're concerned about?
That was
because if you are, other people on here are, I promise.
Yeah, that was the main objection I was nervous about. Other than that, I mean, I have the Ignite scripts and everything, right? They should suffice.
Well, yeah, and the other thing is, so that and this is for anybody on here, if you have not gone into Command, into Designs, and found the listing presentations that they have there, I don't care if you're brand new or you've done this for 20 years, that's a fabulous presentation. And I love KW, and I'm also not a puppet. Not everything is perfect in Command. Like, I'm not here to tell you that and sell you a bill of goods. That listing presentation is fabulous. And the way that it's constructed is that you could sit there and have never been in an appointment before and literally follow it. It has questions on there for you to ask. And yet they're questions that are so good that nobody cares that you're reading them off a piece of paper or a screen. So like I would go in there and I would look at that. I would take the 20 to 30 minutes it would take to put it together and customize it for yourself. And I'm happy to talk about that at greater length if you ever want to, or you can ask one of your coaches as well. But that presentation will keep you from getting yourself into trouble. You'll still need to know objection handlers, but you won't need to know what to say. Like, that is your template so that you can go get a listing every time. So
and if you were on Nico's class, I think he prints that out and uses it in his actual presentation when he goes in front of them.
Yeah, no, like I'm telling you, like, I'm not kidding.
Does, yeah.
I'm not kidding. Like, I would actually just follow it like a template, and you could print it, or you could use a tablet or a laptop and use it that way, whatever you prefer, whatever feels better to you. And I'm telling you right now, like that thing is set up for you to go in and pounce every time. And I'm happy to go over it in better detail with you if you like, both. So you just got to let me know.
Sweet. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Who who else is maybe not crazy comfortable going on listing appointments? Who else has an objection that scares them and maybe stops them from taking action? Oh, y'all are adorable. I know that I know you have one.
I don't have an objection. I'm sorry, somebody else would say, yeah, I guess we're just vibing the same, right? I know.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, I cut you off last time.
No, go ahead. If you're gonna have if you have an
please,
objection,
ladies first.
Mine is going off the objection.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you. So and I wouldn't even say it's an objection. I think mine is I target people I don't think will object. And what I mean by that is like the non-owner occupied. Okay, they don't have an issue with if I sell this, where am I going to move? Or like distressed sellers, which I'm getting a little bit more comfortable with. Got a great affirmation on that from one of our leaders. So it's things like that. So I probably don't target places where I think there'll be an objection. So it just does a little bit different slant on what you said, but just probably limits me.
I was going to say, I don't think that's necessary. Like I can appreciate your thought there, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I just also, but what about when somebody from your sphere, because I know you're keeping in touch with your sphere, what about when somebody from your sphere who is going to have objections wants to meet with you? Like, I'd want to make sure that, like, I love that you're putting effort towards what is potentially an easier conversion. I don't think that's bad at all. And you got to be ready for other opportunities. So that's just, that's my 2 cents there. But I like the way you think, honestly, it makes sense. So, Inez, what were you going to say?
I was going to ask, because what's the difference between the listing presentation and then when you send the pre-listing packet? What are you sending in the pre-listing packet?
That's a great question. So the pre-listing packet, in essence, is something to kind of wet their whistle, which is a total old person term. Anyway, I can't believe I just said that. This is what happens when you have all these kids. It's a way to it's also a way to show that you're a professional, because most agents will not send one, and if they're interviewing with more than one, or even if they aren't, it sets you up. So what are you sending? I mean, there's no hard or fast rule. You do not send your entire marketing presentation or anything like that. You want to make sure that you don't give them too much information to where they no longer need to meet with you, especially if you've set up especially if you're meeting, like if you set up an appointment with a friend, they're not going to not meet with you over the listing presentation. Now the pre-list packet, excuse me. Granted, you're still going to send it because you want to have a standard, and yet, so I tell you, you're not going to send your full marketing campaign, like maybe 1 or 2 things, but like you don't want everything there. You also never want to address, now it's one thing, like, don't get me wrong, because I've also been telling you, and I will continue to, I believe that you should be going through everybody in your database and pulling a CMA and not sending it to necessarily calling them with it and say, hey, I just want to make sure you knew that your house is worth X amount. Did you know that? Like, I think all of your people should know what their house is worth. And yet I'm talking about you get the listing appointment, you're not going to send a CMA because they don't need to meet with you if you already told them the price. Like, you want to make sure that you get that there. So what you are going to send, you're going to send kind of mine was always, there's like a little bit like, hey, this is a little bit about us, because honestly, I didn't want to talk a lot about our team and I didn't want to talk. And if you look up the listing presentation in Command, you'll see that it's very little about you and mostly about them and the market, because that's what they care about. So like your pre-list package is kind of your opportunity to brag about you a bit. So it should say something about you, about your team. I'm gonna tell you right now, I've called myself a team even since I was a solo agent, because I didn't want to rebrand later. And you are part of a team. Like, you've got people that you go to for help. So you've got a team. That's just my 2 cents there. But it's going to be a little bit of that. I always included reviews / references, and if you've never closed a house, Get some people that know you well enough that would give you business to write reviews around you. They don't have to lie and say they bought a house. Like, figure it out and come up with something. And then as you get business, make sure you're getting reviews. It's very important. Because if you were going to go and book dinner at a fancy restaurant for a special occasion, or if you were going to go on vacation and go look to book a hotel, you're going to check reviews and you're going to check ratings. And I know you are. So are your people. So you'd want to send that. I always sent, so I never sent the contract. I always sent the disclosures. There's a couple things with that. They've probably printed them, so it's less for me to worry about. And if I got to that listing appointment and they filled out the disclosures, I knew to cut to the chase because they were ready to list. If they filled out the disclosures, they told me they're listing with me. So it gives you an idea of what you're walking into when you get there. And there's all sorts of other stuff you could throw in. Like, you could throw in, like, you know, these are all things you could find. You know, it could be tips to stage your home. It should be, you know, one thing that I think is great to put in there is questions to ask your prospective realtor. Now, you choose the questions, so you make sure they're things that you would have a great answer to. And yet, if they're interviewing somebody else, especially if it's numbers, most realtors do not know their numbers or their brokerage's numbers or what have you. So yeah, so it'd be like bragging on you / the brokerage, because like if you're newer and you don't really have a lot of numbers to share, use the brokerage numbers. I mean, you're part of a brokerage, so there's nothing wrong with using our average days on market and average list price to sale price ratio, all of which you can get right in Stellar. So you know, so that's kind of what you would do. And if you remind me, because I will not remember, we have a pre-list package for my team that I'm happy to send. I mean, it won't have the disclosures in it because I don't need to send you that. But as far as like the pretty thing that we send, and we send ours. So, I mean, in the good old days, we would have delivered it personally. We would have dropped it at their door. And yet a couple things there. If you're setting appointments, like, you should be setting appointments as quickly as possible. Like, if somebody raises their hand and says they're interested in selling, you don't tell them, hey, well, let's meet in a couple of weeks. You tell them, hey, when are you free tomorrow? I mean, truthfully, like, you get in as quickly as possible unless they will not allow you to. So it makes it harder to hand deliver things. And I just think right now, if you're at all busy and working with you're too busy for it. So what we did is we turned ours into, it's all electronic. So they basically click a link, and then, you know, it's like, I don't think we use the same program, but like Honey Weedman brought it up before, the Flip Snack. Like, you could basically take something that you've created and put it in a form where they can just click through page by page. So it looks a little fancier than a PDF. The systems they're free. Like, it's an easy thing to convert. So, but anyways, if you remind me, I can send you ours for an idea. And then you could go from there.
Thank you.
So, and in fact, when I know one of you will remind me, I'll put it on Facebook as well. So that's that. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Anything else around listing presentation and best practices? Okay. Let's go into the pre-qualifying, because I'm glad that somebody brought that up. I think it was Lisa, and I am all about, like, I get all like Papa Bear worried for you guys when you're out there so busy with buyers, and I just wonder if you're really working with real buyers or not. And I don't say that in judgment. I say that I've been there. I've shown the 50 houses and then they don't buy, or they buy with their best friend, or they go to a builder and don't put my name. Like, I've been there. So, so pre-qualifying buyers, I'm gonna tell you right now, and adding in the question about out-of-town buyers, the process should be no different no matter who it is, whether they're local or not, whether they're a stranger or somebody that you're super close with. If you guys want to, and this is the same for listing as well, like, you should have a business standard that you pre-qualify everybody before you meet with them. And it's not necessarily to not meet with them, although if you really find out ridiculous things, maybe you do cancel the meeting. It's to go in prepared. So as far as pre-qualifying buyers, first of all, you've got to know right out of the gate. And if it offends them that you're asking, then you're not talking to the right people anyways. You've got to know whether they're financed or cash. And if they're financed, are they approved or not? Nope. Great. Here's a few names. And I would honestly, guys, like, I'm not saying you're wrong if you do it differently. I would not be meeting with them until they went and got pre-approved. Because in this market, more than ever, like, you know, well and good, they can't do anything unless they're approved. And if there's a house that they love today, it's gone tomorrow. So there's truly no reason to meet until they're pre-approved. If they're cash, and this is, again, this is where it can get weird, and this is your call. Cool. Can you bring your proof? Like, maybe you don't need to see it before you meet, but can you bring proof of funds to our meeting? If they freak out at that question, you know, depending on how they freak out, if they ask questions, you can explain, like, you have to know that they've actually got the money. Because otherwise, right out of the bat, those two things, you'll completely waste your time. If you're working with somebody who can't actually qualify, what a time suck. And not only is it going to waste your time, that takes away at your momentum and at your confidence. And honestly, that stuff will kill you. Like, there's enough things in this business to knock you down on a regular basis. You don't need to add to it. So, those are the initial things. You know, you're going to want to know what their timeline is. That's super important. You're going to want to know if they're in a lease, how much time do they have left? If they find something early, are they prepared to buy the lease out? You know, because if their lease is another 9 months and they're absolutely not willing to buy it out or double pay, then again, it's not the time to be looking for them right now. You've got to put them on the back burner. I think one of the most, this is not necessarily a pre-qual thing, and this is for the meeting. I'm a big fan of the ABC buyer kind of sheet. And what in, like, the summary of it, if you Google it, you should probably be able to find it. Otherwise, I think I could probably dig it up. But you know, basically it defines what an A, B, or C buyer is. And an A buyer is somebody who needs to buy, is going to be homeless if they don't, need to be in 30 to 60 days max. A B buyer is somebody who maybe has some circumstances, like, you know, they need to wait a little bit longer to get pre-approved or to get out of their lease, but they're very close to buying and they're maybe 60 to 90 days out or something like that. And a C buyer is the one that I'm worried about a lot of people probably spending time with, which is a C buyer is, you know, well, if the right house comes along, or, you know, if I can get a deal, you know, or, you know, I'm moving next year, but I'll look now, like, those are the C buyers. And the beauty of this, there's an actual form, and it came out of the old, the original version of Bold, but you essentially would put it into your presentation at the end, right? You were also going to go into broker agency, and they sign it. You explain what the different levels of buyer are, and they sign and state what type of buyer they are. And you essentially have the conversation like, look, I need you to understand that A buyers, they have my top priority. And that's because, look, they literally could be homeless if they didn't find a home. B buyers are kind of like, you explain the hierarchy. And then you tell them, like, look, if you're a C buyer and you switch to B or switch to A, we'll be in communication and we'll adjust this. But essentially what that does is it frees you up from dropping everything to go show some wishy-washy C buyer a house that you know they're not going to buy. Like, you get that buy-in from them up front. So I squirreled on you because that's not really part of the pre-qual, and yet I do think that's an important thing, because the fastest way to burn out in this business is to work with buyers that aren't really buyers. But yes, you want to know about their financing, you want to know about their timeline. You want to make sure, like, if you're doing a buyer consultation, so you've set up the appointment for tomorrow at 3, you're going to make sure, okay, so this is assuming you don't know, like, okay, Mr. Buyer, is there a Mrs. Buyer? Or, you know, you wouldn't necessarily say that because it's 2021. Is there somebody, you know, is there somebody else that's going to be buying with you? Yes or no? Okay, great. If it's yes, are they going to be with us tomorrow? Yes, great. No? Okay, well, let's make sure we schedule it for a time where they could be there. If they tell you there's nobody else buying with them, then the next question I would ask is, okay, well, is there anybody else who's going to be involved in the process? look, you have a first-time buyer. How many of you have had mom or dad show up and you didn't know it? And they have no skin in the game, and yet they get up there and they ruin everything for you. Okay, great. If somebody else is going to be involved, even though they're not part of the actual finance, great. When can we meet so that they can be there too, to make sure that we're all on the same page? I would make sure that you don't, if you're going to have a proper buyer consultation, which you should be having, you want everybody there. You want to make sure that you don't please one and then the other has no clue what's going on. A, now they don't like you right out the gate because you didn't involve them. B, you're never going to get them on the same page. So that's an important question to ask. Are all parties that are part of the decision going to be there? Same thing with a listing, for the record. Most of these translate to both. So those are some of the things that I would ask. I feel like you have a little bit less pre-qual work with a buyer, to be honest, which is great. Only because I think, you know, with a listing, like, they already have the house, therefore you have some house questions. When you're pre-qualifying a buyer, I would not necessarily be asking them, what are you looking for? Because that's really what the consultation is for. So does that kind of help you? And are there any holes that I left that you have another question with? If you're answering me, you're muted.
Nope, all set.
Okay. As far as, yes, go. Who is that?
Before we change topics, so the team I'm on, we have inside sales associates,
Yeah.
and there's 4 qualifying questions that they ask before they'll pass it on to us. It's what is your timeline, and they consider hot to be within 90 days.
Okay.
So they're about to 90 days. It's do you have a house to sell? It's, are you approved for financing? And the other one, I don't think I heard you say, is, are you working with another agent?
So those are great. The do you have a house to sell is huge. And as much as we might want their answer to be no, if their answer is yes, unless they live out of area, you just found a listing.
Right.
So yay. Are you working with another agent? That is a great question. I feel like, here's what I'll tell you. If you already asked that, don't ask it again, because now you sound weird. And so, you know, I'm just thinking, like, where are you finding these leads? Okay, if you found it from an open house, I would hope that you asked that before you took their information. Like, so, and that's a great question. If you don't know the answer to that question, great. So thank you for adding that. That's perfect.
Oh, sure. And then,
Hudson,
Yes.
I just had a listing appointment, and during our conversation, she said, I haven't signed anything with this girl, and we've been fooling around for 2 months, and my property, you know, I still don't have it listed. And I said, so you have an agent that has done work for you? And she said, no, she hasn't. This is what I want for my property. This is, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I just said to her, so what I need to know from you is why you haven't listed the property, and, you know, do you feel more obligated to list with her because you have been in communication, you know, with her? She said, no, I actually don't really like her. I said, okay, then what I need to know is, you like me well enough for me to go ahead and move forward and tell you, you know, get a CMA done so that you know what your property's worth. I know what you want for it, you know, yada, yada, but I need to know it's me and you. And this other agent isn't gonna, you know, cause you any issues, or you've signed something. And she said, no, I haven't signed anything. I'm 100% with, you know, with you. I've had that conversation before and had it go the opposite direction. Well, we started talking to him before, and we really like what you offer, but we kind of felt bad when we told her we were going with somebody else. So it's a really important question to ask and find.
Yes, and I think you bring up a good point of just of digging deeper. Like, if you get an answer that causes your eyebrow to raise at all, like, dig in on it a little bit and make sure that you really understand. I haven't been paying attention to the chat because I haven't been looking at the computer. So Benjamin, you said Google Forms could work too, and I don't disagree. And at the same time, when you're pre-qualifying, I would strongly recommend voice to voice. And one of the biggest reasons is that if you're doing voice to voice, like you're reading their personality, you're understanding how they communicate. So I feel like you're able to go in better prepared if you know that they're a highly detailed person, or they're maybe a high driver and they just want, give me the meat, give me the meat, give me the meat. So I would just, it's not a bad idea. And I'm all about leveraging technology where we can. And I would probably not for a pre-qual, just personally, I wouldn't do that. Yeah, so I just want to throw that out there. No right or wrong. That's my thoughts on that. I want to move because we've only got like 9 minutes left. I want to talk about, well, actually real quick, out of town buyers. The only thing that I would add in is I would talk to them. I would make sure, okay, so if you've got an out of town buyer, are they comfortable writing an offer on something sight unseen? And if they are, what does that look like? Does it mean they need to FaceTime you? Does that mean that they want a video? Does that mean that they want both? So I would just talk expectations with an out of town buyer. I would also be careful you're not a tour guide. And again, this is my opinion. If you do things differently, no judgment on you. I'm a big fan of higher dollar per hour return. If you've got somebody who's not moving for months and months and they're going to be in town, yeah, maybe you sit with them face to face, put a face to a name. You do not need to tour them around neighborhoods. You can tell them where to look around that meets their criteria. So I'd be careful. If somebody's coming in town, this is the other thing. They need to have an understanding that they are not your only client, unless they are your only client. And even then I would be careful what I commit myself to, because I've had buyers that have come in and they think because they're here for 2 or 3 days that you are going to drop your entire life and every other client that you have for 2 to 3 days. And I think that most people, if you set the expectation that that's just not how it works, they'll respect it and they'll understand. I think the problem is if it's never addressed until they get here, or they've sent you an email the night before they get here and send you 72 properties because they think that you've cleared your entire life. So that's the only thing. So your pre-qual is the same. Your buyer presentation is the same. You're just going to add in some logistics questions because there are extra logistics when somebody is buying from out of town. So that's the deal with that. Let's talk about the consistency because I want to make sure that we at least touch on that. So the consistency, I mean, honestly, like, and I don't mean to be a commercial, but let's be honest, like utilize command, or if you hate command, go find a CR, like utilize something to automate it. There's no reason, like, look, nobody can make the calls. Well, that's not true. You could hire an ISA to make calls for you and yet you won't have the same result. When we're talking about your sphere, if we're talking about your sphere, you've got to make the phone calls. Almost everything else can be automated though. There's ways to automate text messages. You could choose Twilio. Or you could just make it easier. I shared an app that I use, which is called Reach. The reason I keep laughing, I get these stop requests from you guys when I send out texts. Those texts actually come from me, from my cell phone. I swear it's not a service, but I do use an app that helps me send them out a little more rapid fire, so it gets done quicker. And that app is called Reach again. But yeah, I mean, emails, that's automatic. I mean, so I think, look, even if you don't use everything in command, you're here and you have access to it. I would strongly suggest that you have everybody on a neighborhood nurture, which is that you could set it to biweekly or monthly. I would do monthly, where once a month they're going to get an email and it's going to tell them their estimated home value. Look, that's the same thing that Zillow does and all, and yet everybody loves Zillow. So let's just beat them at their own game. Our numbers are more accurate because command pulls by neighborhood rather than a radius search. So I would have everybody on that, and then they should be receiving something else. They should be getting 2 emails from you a month, period. If you don't like that, I understand. I'm not going to make you do it. And I'm telling you right now, there's 8,000 studies to show that that's how often they need to hear from you, whether they read the email or not. So, and I would send out some sort of newsletter monthly. So you could find canned ones. You could also, gosh, we've got a great, now this is only quarterly, but this is something you could add. There's a great, I brought it up in a meeting a few weeks ago, but there's a little magazine that you can, or they call it a zine. I don't know that was a thing. I'm still not into it, but there's a branded kind of thing that you can go into. It takes very little time to go in and update it to brand it to you. You can send out quarterly. And that might be something that maybe you spend a little extra money, especially if they're A people, to mail. But you can automate the emails. I think that the smartest thing you could be doing right now, and this could still be, these don't need to be individualized. This could just be once a month you redid it. And yet I'd be sending out a video email. I know that 9 out of 10 of you are like, I don't want to do that. And your people are much more likely to click on your video, your short video. We're talking about like 2 minutes or less. They're much more likely to do that and listen to part or all of it than they are to actually read the email if it's in regular, written content. So I think it would be very easy, especially in a market like this where things are so crazy. Hey, here's what we see going on in the market right now. This is what happened in the past few weeks. Whatever, like, it doesn't have to be perfect and it doesn't have to be polished. It just has to be something they haven't heard. And that's what I would recommend. I would stay away from. I mean, like, look, guys, you all over the past 3 days got so many emails saying Happy Memorial Day. Honestly, be careful about being white noise. What's something different that you can reach out about? If you're going to send out holiday cards, like, because I'm a firm believer that you should be sending at least 4 things in the mail every year. If you're going to send holiday cards out, if you want to do the traditional holidays, no judgment, that's great. You're doing something. I'd be picking random holidays. I'd go. I mean, there's an everything type of day. I mean, like, there's so many, like, talk like a pirate day and stupid stuff like that. Like, stand out from the noise. Like, don't fall. Like, every time daylight savings changes, I die a little bit inside when I get 32,000 emails from companies and realtors. We all know the time changed. We all have phones that update automatically and watches that update automatically. So just be careful. Like, I want you to automate, and I also want you to be strategic and stand out from the crowd. And you can do both. The other thing is keeping on a schedule. And this is, again, why I am preaching for command. Because if you have everybody in there, and if you have them on the DTD2 schedule, which means you're going to get notified 4 times a year to call them. If you have them on the neighborhood, on the birthday reminder, not that it's going to send them some automatic text that has some weird, like, just, hey, it's so-and-so's birthday in a week. I need to, like, if you just open command once a day, you would have your to-do list right there. Like, to me, that's how you stay consistent, that you don't have to think about it. You just have to open that one thing and go to your task and be like, okay, like, the emails are automatic. Those are going to push out as long as you set them on a plan. So that's a set it and forget it one-time deal. The stuff that you actually need to take action for is, if you just had a list every day, now your job becomes foolproof. And what's the worst thing? You have a day where you're off a bit. Okay, well, it's going to sit there in that activity and it's going to stay past due until you clear it out. So that's the other thing. It doesn't disappear. If you don't do it, it will sit there until you do it. And that way, as long as you just don't fall super behind, you can always catch up, and you don't need to think about, oh, who did I forget? The same thing, we'll talk real briefly before we wrap up. If you're looking to farm an area, it's the same thing. So let's say that you're going to do a mini farm and you're going to do an 8x8 around it, like we talked about earlier. You're getting the data from somewhere, import it into command and put it on a plan so that you know to do it. Okay, it's been a week. I got to send the next thing out. It's been a week. I got to go door knocking. It's been a week. I got to, like, whatever it is. And then if you're going to farm, this is my best advice for that, because I'm actually a firm, like, to the point where I'm no longer selling, obviously, and I'm getting itchy and want to start farming just because I think this market is bringing out so many listings. I would pick an area where you can afford to send them something every 3 weeks. And I know that sounds extreme, and you want to break in quick and you want to be top of mind. And I promise you that even in the neighborhoods where somebody's got a super stronghold, nobody is mailing more than once a month. If you mailed every 3 weeks, it's like 2 or 3 extra mailings for the year. Just pick an area where that fits into your budget, stand out from the noise, and get listings sooner rather than later. But within all of that, it's just utilize the technology that you have to make it so that you can be consistent. Because honestly, it's easy if you just have the reminders. So any other questions about that before we wrap this up? Because I know it's 1 o'clock. All right. Hey, you guys, I appreciate you being here. Just come back next month. And here's the thing. If you, in between now and next month, you'll have a question. You'll have a curiosity about hey, what about this? You can come and find me. You can come and find Michelle, or write it down and bring it here. Because the more that we participate, like, I really ideally should not be the only one talking. We have a lot of smart people here. So the more you participate, so just come ready next time. I'm not going to call you out. I'm just saying, if you've got stuff you want to talk about, bring it here. Okay. Have a beautiful, beautiful day. I appreciate you guys.
You too.